Hello and welcome to How to Build Vampire Coast Armies. In this video I'm going to go over how to build Vampire Coast armies for every single stage of the game. First things first, we need to go over the overall army strengths and weaknesses. First of all, the strengths. They have extremely powerful ranged units, with a large number of them having access to armor-piercing damage and long range. They also have excellent monsters, with a high amount of health and decent damage to boot, and they also have access to some very powerful laws of magic. As for their weaknesses, however, they have extremely weak front lines unit, with the worst front lines in the games even when you get to the top end, and there's not really much point bringing them. Most ranged units also need a direct line of sight, since almost all of them are gunpowder units, and so can't fire in an arc. And finally, all the mounts that are on lords and heroes that aren't legendary suck tremendously. First up, we have the early game composition. For this, we have access to tier 0 units, which are the lords of the Vampire Fleet Admirals with either polearms or pistols, of the deeps, death and vampires. And tier 1 units, which are zombie pirate gunnery mob, zombie pirate deckhands mob, and fellbats. For our early game composition, we're going to lead them with a pistol Vampire Fleet Admiral with the Lore of the Vampires. Later on, we're going to get another caster that is melee only, so we're going to go with the pistols for now for a bit of variety, and it also keeps your lord in a safer position in battles. Of course, we have to go with the Lore of the Vampires because it is so goddamn overpowered, and getting it from the get-go is a must. This lord might not be the best in duels, but with this much ranged firepower, you can focus fire most lords and heroes anyway. Which brings me to the 13 zombie pirate gunnery mobs. There's just no point going deckhands. Yes, they have better melee stats, but they are still just glorified zombie meat shields. Taking these lads, they are still a weak-ass meat shield, but now they can throw out a ton of range damage before the enemy reaches your lines. So overall, the added damage more than makes up for the very minor differences in tankiness. Finally, closing out this army comp, we have 6 fellbats. These are super duper weak flyers, but they are flyers and can just about get away with it in the early game. Use them to get over and around the enemy and swarm their backlines 2 or 3 on 1, and they should do just fine. Anything more than that, and they are definitely going to struggle. The strengths of this army is that you have a ton of ranged firepower. The flyers can also get over and around almost any enemy, and you get that magical value right out the gate. As for the weaknesses, there are no real front lines units, so if the enemy is fast, you may be in trouble. Fellbats are also weak as hell, so need to outnumber the enemy, and if they get ganged up on, they will fall incredibly quickly. And finally, you don't really have any capability to duel very well, since your lord is pretty weak, and if you can't focus fire the enemy lord or hero with ranged units, you're definitely going to lose. Moving on to the mid-game composition now. For this we have access to tier 2 units. These are polearm zombie pirate deckhands mobs, scurvy dogs, handgun zombie pirate gunnery mob, bomber zombie pirate gunnery mobs, mortars, animated hulks and the bloated corpse, and tier 3 units, which are vampire fleet captains of death, deep and vampires, hand cannon zombie pirate gunnery mobs, gunnery wights, deck droppers, carronades, sirens, Mongols, rotting Prometheans, Mongol haunters, and Queen Bess, who is technically unlocked via a right upon reaching faction leader level 12, which is about the mid-game. For the mid-game composition, starting off with that same pistol vampire's lord. They have just the one mount, so getting it early is totally fine, even if it does suck a little bit. Aside from that, they should be looking to get a more complete spellbook and stick to the backlines, providing missile and magical support where needed. We're also going to be picking up a gunnery wight. Keep these guys near to your most damaging ranged troops, either artillery or ranged lines. They provide buffs just by existing, but once they get abilities online, it takes them to a whole new level and lets them replenish your unit's ammo, and on some units, that can make a big difference. They can also do some decent long-range missile damage, but their priority is buffing rather than focusing on their own damage. And our final hero is the Vampire Fleet Captain of the Deeps. A third hero is almost sacrilegious, but the Lore of the Deeps is too much fun and is unique to these lads, so why not? Use the spells to unleash devastating damage, slow down, and all around hassle the enemy as much as you can. They are also melee fighters, but not the best, so keep them back and safe where you can. Going to our quote front lines now, we have 4 hand cannons. These are going to serve as a front line due to their short range but devastating missiles. They can unleash massive damage once the enemy gets near, and when combined with your other units, this is enough to send most enemies packing before they even reach your lines. Of course, if they get caught, they will easily lose, but until that point, they will totally slap. Going with 5 handgunners, these are going to be our ranged lines with their longer range armor-piercing missiles. Of course, they need line of sight, so try to make gaps for them to fire through to avoid friendly fire, and they will do great work. Ranged units like these can target basically anything and do work, so just focus them on whatever is the biggest threat, and you should be just fine. Just remember not to let them get flanked, or you are losing a ton of your damage. We're going to pick up 4 scurvy dogs. We're going to be replacing our fellbats with these boys, since they are just better. They may not fly, but still have blazing fast speed, and will eviscerate anything on the enemy backlines, and, as with all doggo units, they rip and tear anything retreating. Send them in 2 on 1 to burst down enemies, and don't let them get caught out by anything better than ranged, or they will quickly fall. We're going to go with 2 mortars, or replace them with Queen Bess if you can get the right going. The mortars are your pretty standard mortar units. Nice explosive damage over a long range and a large firing arc, so no worries of shooting your units in the back. Queen Bess, however, is the destroyer of enemy worlds, with huge range, massive damage, and great accuracy with these large explosive shots. Target her on whatever blob is the highest threat to you, and watch it disappear in real time. Finally, wrapping up this comp, we're going to take 2 carronades. Again, similar to your standard cannons units. Do decent armor-piercing damage over a long range in a straight firing arc, work well versus large enemy units since it makes it much easier for them to aim, so focus your fire and burst the buggers down. Strengths of this army, it has a huge amount of ranged armor-piercing damage. You're also bringing 2 extremely powerful laws of magic, and the scurvy dogs provide excellent flanking capability. As for the weaknesses, still no real front lines, so if the enemy makes it to your lines, you will be in trouble. None of your heroes are also outstanding in melee, so you're going to struggle in your duels versus lords that can take on the rest of your army. Dogs can only also take out ranged or retreating units, so you have to be careful when sending them in. And finally, we come to our late game composition. For this, we have access to tier 4 units, which are Depth Guard, Rotting Promethean Gunnery Mobs, Bomber Deck Droppers, Handgun Deck Droppers, and Deck Gunners. And finally, tier 5 units, Polearm Depth Guard, Death Shriek Terrorgeists, Rotting Leviathans, and the Necrofex Colossus. The late game composition, of course we're keeping the same Lord, should have all their spells by now, and be healing your own troops whilst laying waste to any unfortunate clumps who find themselves in the path of a Wind of Death. No later mounts, which is big sad, and means they aren't the best lords for combats, but the ranged and magic at least somewhat make up for it. Same story for the Gunnery Wight, you should have all your abilities to buff friendly ranged troops. You can also get on the same weak mount, so you may as well. Keep them near to your most damaging ranged troops to top them up with ammo and keep them buffed. And the same story once again for the Vampire Fleet Captain of the Deeps. Get all the spells for maximum magical mayhem, get on the crappy mount for tiny improvements in combat, keep them safe on the backlines if you can, and maybe get in some light melee combat where needed. Bumping up to 6 hand cannons here, keeping the same front lines as before, but we've removed some chaff from the army, so we can get 2 more. For the range lines, we're going with 6 deck gunners. We're upgrading to the top of the line ranged infantry for the vampires. Huge range, huge damage, but also slow as hell and weak in melee. Keep them on the backlines and firing as constantly as you can. They do need line of sight, so just make sure they have it, otherwise you basically just have a bunch of expensive ornamental units. Their damage is so good that you can take on pretty much anything with them, so just focus fire on the biggest threats, keep them safe, and you should be golden. Gonna go with 3 Necrofex Colossus, or Colossi. Another unit that you could use 20 of and be fine with it, but it is quite boring, so we're going to go for a mere 3. Their range and damage is incredible, and they perform the job of carronades, but only do it better, so it's a clear upgrade. They can also do some great work in the front lines, so don't be afraid to send them in where needed. They are great no matter how you use them, so get some in your armies, and you can't go far wrong. And our final units are the 2 Mortars, or Queen Besses if you can get the right going, which is the same as the previous tier. Strengths of this composition, massive damage from range to take on all kinds of targets. You also have powerful hybrid weapon monsters that can do work from a range and in melee, and you can outrange most armies in the entire game. Weaknesses, however, still have a lot of ranged troops, so if you're against a fast or flying enemy force, you may be in trouble. The Necrofex are also huge targets for enemy range, so if they get focus fire, they can go down quite quickly. And you still don't really have an answer for enemy lords and heroes, aside from focus firing them with range. The mounts that your lords and heroes have access to are just terrible, so keep them safe and just pray that no one comes to duel you. And now to close us out and show you this army in action, I'll pass you over to live commentary Miles. Take it away. Thank you very much for that, Miles. As you can see, we're of course going against the Empire, and they are one of the only factions in the game that can actually outrange us because their Hellstorm rocket batteries have 480 range, whereas the Queen Bess only has 450. So my strategy, even though I deployed over here, is to retreat over here to basically draw them out, because if they hold this hilltop, it's going to be much more difficult for me. So if I force them to at least advance towards me, then I can then push back towards them and take them out nice and quick. So as you can see, they are now charging ahead, all of their infantry and their cab. I'm going to slow this right down. And the Luminactor faction, pretty much everything is coming down these hills apart from the Hellstorm rocket batteries. I'm unfortunately not really going to be able to do much against them because I don't have any speed units, so that might be something to consider. Maybe swap out a unit of hand cannons and deck gunners for some dogs, or maybe some bats, or maybe some Death Shriek Terrorgeists. You know, whatever picks your fancy, just something fast that can get around the enemy lines. But nevertheless, we will do our best to fend off these Empire invaders. So the first order of business, we have the cav coming towards us. I decided to use these zombie pirate gunnery mob hand cannons. Just as a side note here, whoever named the Vampire Coast, just stop. Just call them zombie hand cannons. It's fine. I really don't mind. But this stuff is too long. Why are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words, and these are 2? It's very stupid. Okay, but anyway, I digress. The laws are even worse. But, you know, what can you do about it? So, as you can see, the Demogryph Knights getting absolutely annihilated by the hand cannons. That is why I love them on the front lines, because once the enemy gets in close, that is when they start to take all their damage, and they're retreated before they even see a single lick of combat. Now, my Vampire Fleet Captain of the Deeps, a little bit of a shit position, kind of forgot about her, so I do feel quite bad about that. She's going to face off against the General of the Empire, but she will, of course, be getting the full support of my zombie pirate gunnery mob hand cannons. I'm just going to call them hand cannons from now on, once they get into range. On the right-hand side here, we can see that some of the Demogryph Knight Halberdiers actually managed to get into my hand cannons, so it did take quite a chunk of damage. So my Lord is going to move in, try and clump up these enemies, and then the hand cannons are going to do the majority of the work. The deck gunners, I've moved 3 units of them onto the hilltops so they can get a nice, clear shot onto pretty much everything the enemy is bringing towards us. And the Queen Bestas are, of course, firing into pretty much anything. Just this big old clump of enemies over here. That is Queen Bestas' dream, my guy. As we can see, the hand cannons doing a spectacular job, managing even to avoid hitting the Vampire Fleet Captain too much. It's Fleet Admiral, Jesus, long names, man. Just my Lord, that is what they will be known as, and my hero, which is quickly dying. The Gunnery White is, of course, over here just providing passive bonuses, and I will be shortly clicking the active bonuses. These dead gunners now moving into a more clear position in this gap here to try and fire upon these enemies approaching. I didn't want them to shoot into the side of this hand cannon. Speaking of which, this hand cannon also moving forward. See this unit of great swords approaching, so I'm surely about to focus all of my attention and my fire from these hand cannons onto those to eliminate them as quickly as possible, just as soon as we've seen off the General of the Empire. As you can see, oh, that Luminac of High shot annihilates my Vampire Fleet Captain, my hero. It was very upsetting indeed. There we go. The accuracy and the reload speed has come out, so now we should see some utter annihilation of the enemy troops. On the right-hand side here, my Lord is doing pretty much the same thing as my Fleet Captain was doing, but she can actually do it. So, clustering up these great swords. Of course, the Caribou great swords coming in somewhere. I swear they were here. Where are they? There was one unit of great swords that would not. There they are. The bane of every single one of these battles, because they just do not ever retreat. So anyway, yes, my Lord is clumping them up, and the hand cannons are doing spectacular work. The deck gun is just providing constant pressure with massive arm-piercing damage over a long range. They don't really have an answer for it. Of course, the Hellstorm rocket batteries are continually firing, but there's only so fast they can fire. I'm just annihilating their entire army whilst they sit at the back, unable to really do anything else. The Luminacs of High, of course, doing spectacular damage to all of my large targets if they so decide to shoot them. But for now, they decide to shoot my hand cannons, which, you know, it's doing good damage, but you could shoot Queen Best or something. That'd be a much better use of your time. As you can see, the Warrior Priest is now moving forwards, but all these hand cannons are ready and waiting for him. And will they let loose a volley before he collides with them? They should. There they go, and yes, his health just evaporates, and his leadership is at -50. I'll see you later, buddy boy. It's been nice knowing you. As you can see on the right-hand side here, the Luminac of Haish has been seen off, and the hand cannons are now moving forward to take out what remains of the enemy troops. There's pretty much nothing left on the enemy side. They've lost the majority of their army, 3/4 of it, in fact. Wait, maths? Yes, 3/4 of it, in fact. We've lost about half of ours, but that's pretty much all due to these guys. 111 and 26. That's not correct. 111 and 8 kills just because you're in the trees and you're just blowing yourself up. These guys have somehow managed to annihilate themselves simply by sitting in some trees, which is quite impressive if you think about it. And there we go, army losses. The army is defeated and we take the victory. So yes, things I could have improved here. Something to stake out the Hellstorm rocket batteries, and probably not losing that Fleet Captain hero, because that was quite a misplay. Yeah, I should have pulled her out nice and quickly and got some health from the Lore of Vampires lady. But nevertheless, we did a spectacular job. Annihilated pretty much everything and only lost that one unit, didn't we? Did we lose more? No, we just lost that one unit. I mean, look at that. That is wonderful. So as you can see in the stats here, moving on, starting with the Lord. First things first, 26 kills. Again, I don't really care if the Lord doesn't really get many kills, because the Vampire Coast Lords are kind of a bit crap. So I'm just there. They are just there to do vampires things and cast plenty of healing. And that's what they did. Kept these 3 hand cannons live with a couple of casts. I didn't showcase them because I'm bad. But yes, that's what she did, and she clumped them up and allowed the hand cannons to get a ton of value, so I'm more than happy with that performance. The Gunnery White, of course, was at the back, managed to pick up 19 kills of his own of his long-ranged missile fire, but again, he was just simply there to buff these guys, give them ammo, everything that they needed, and as you can see from their stats, he did a pretty good job. Yeah, the hero didn't do too well. She was dueling the general and the hero and managed to get annihilated by Luminac of High, so feels bad for her with 0 kills, but you know, we live and we learn. 622 damage dealt, very, very nice indeed. As for the hand cannons, and this is spectacular, 9,000 damage. Oh my god, look at the damage value, 1,600, 1,500. Only 500 there, 715, 743, and 1,000. Spectacular. Who needs front lines if the enemy can't even make it to you, okay? You put hand cannons at the front of your army, you saw what was happening. A great swords unit had come, had focus fire, all 3 of them. I mean, maybe if they attacked in a more direct way and all at once, they might have made it through. But they didn't, so I could just focus fire them and annihilate them. It worked on Lords, it worked on Heroes, it worked on Cav, it worked on pretty much anything they sent us, and they did a spectacular job. Each side had its ups and downs. The right-hand side definitely struggled a little bit more, mostly because of the terrain, I believe. But nevertheless, they did a spectacular job, and they're all still standing. So a couple of turns of replenishment. Stop texting me! So a couple of turns of replenishment, and they should do wonderfully. Moving on to the deck gunners now. These are much longer range. They didn't actually get as many kills, mostly because once enemies got into range, the handguns were annihilating there. But 767, 733, 800, 600, 600, 870. So about an average of about 700 damage value, which is certainly nothing to scoff at. That is plenty of damage. And as I said, they were at the back, took basically no damage and providing a ton of passive, just passive damage, and you can't beat that. If you're constantly doing damage to the enemy and they cannot really do anything to stop you, that's brilliant, because eventually you will win. The longer the battle goes on, the better you are going to do, and the worse they are going to do. You just can't beat it. And moving on to the Necrofex, I just forgot the name of the unit, the Necrofex Colossus. So we got 625, 1400, and 1200. Not too bad at all. Of course, the kills, are pretty low. These guys were mostly focusing the Luminax of Height, so they're very expensive units. That's why their damage value is so high, but their kills are so low. More than happy with that. I probably could have sent them in, got them in the front lines a bit more, but I didn't want to send them in and then have them be a massive range target for me and the enemy to, well, for me to aim around, and for the enemy, I wish I could speak, folks, I really do, for the enemy to aim at. So that's why I kept them in the back, and they did fantastically. If the hand cannons had struggled a bit more, I'd have probably sent them in, but they didn't, so I didn't. And finally, the Queen Bessers. Yes, I know having two of them is basically cheating, but look at that, 10,000 damage and 1,000 damage value, and 16,000 damage dealt and 1,781 damage value. You just can't beat that, folks. You just can't beat it. Anything that's infantry, anything at all, in fact, it doesn't have to be infantry, the Queen Bess annihilates all. So if you can get 1 or 2 or 10 in your army, maybe not 10, that'd be quite boring, but if you can get a lot of them in your army, or even just 1, do it, because they are outstanding units. And that just about wraps up everything. Leave in the comments below your army composition for the Vampire Coast. I'd love to hear it. If you enjoyed this video at any point, do consider leaving it a like. It really does help out more than you could ever know. And if you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to subscribe. Of course, next year we're going to have all the Warhammer 3 guides coming out, hitting you hard and fast at the start of next year. So definitely subscribe if you want to see that. If you want to support the channel, then head on over to COLONELDAMNEDERS.store. You've got all sorts of funky fresh designs on t-shirts and mugs and more. So definitely have a browse and find something that you like. Also, consider becoming a supporter by being a member on YouTube, a patron on Patreon, or a subscriber on Twitch. Doing so gets you shoutouts like It's Your Boy LC for their support at the Unclean Ones tier. Thanks to all supporters, thank you all for watching, and for now, I've been Colonel Damneders, and I will see you next turn.